Now time for a discussion. The discussion of the date, Humans to Mars by Explore Mars. Here to take part in the discussion, Chris Carberry and Janet Ivey, Explore Mars. Jim Garvin, NASA Goddard Chief Scientist. Joey Cassady, Aerojet Rocketdyne. Over to you, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Chris Carberry. I'm CEO of Explore Mars, and thank you for the European Rover Challenge for this opportunity. I think I can speak for everybody when I say we wish we could be there in person. So maybe in the future years we can come there. We would very much enjoy that. For those of you who aren't familiar with Explore Mars, we're a nonprofit organization based in the United States, but we do a lot of international activities as well. You were probably best known for the Humans to Mars Summit. And for those of you who don't know, our virtual Humans to Mars Summit will be taking place next week on September 13th through 15th. So if you're interested in registering this year, and this year it's free, which is a first and hopefully a last, you can go to exploremars.org to register. Explore Mars also runs the Mars Innovation Forum events, do a lot of policy work, and thanks to the efforts of our president, Janet Ivey, who I'll introduce in a moment, do an extraordinary amount of successful STEM education work as well. So really excited to be here today because we are living in exciting times. Some extraordinary things will be happening over the next couple of decades, just a few of them over the next, even just over the next few years. You know, we're going to start the process of returning to the moon. Artemis 1 will be launching to do an orbit around the moon, an uncrewed orbit, later this year. But then we'll be soon followed up by crew missions, and hopefully we'll be landing humans back on the surface of the moon by the mid-2020s. Later this year, the James Webb Space Telescope is launching, the biggest telescope ever sent into space. So we will be learning things about the universe we have never even conceived of before, probably. Robotic exploration continues as well. As you know, this has been a very busy year for Mars. NASA, the United Arab Emirates, and China have successful missions that arrived at Mars this year, which will not only possibly change our whole perception of the nature of life in the universe, but are also key stepping stones to getting humans to Mars. So we're very excited about that, as well as upcoming missions from Europe with the ExoMars mission. Japan and India are also sending them, and many other countries are interested in Mars exploration and exploring other parts of the solar system. So this is a very exciting time for worldwide space exploration. And of course, commercial space is making rapid progress. I'm sure you all saw that Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin successfully sent suborbital flights recently. SpaceX is continuing to make their progress, and we are particularly excited with a SpaceX launch that is taking place next week. The Inspiration 4 mission, one of our board members, Dr. Cyan Proctor, there's Jan's hand holding up the cover. The Inspiration 4 mission, Cyan Proctor is one of those 4 astronauts. So they're tentatively launched to be the first all-private mission into space. They'll be orbiting for 3 days at a higher orbit to the International Space Station, roughly the same orbit as the Hubble Space Telescope. So this is a really momentous time when we're truly getting the private sector into space. So we're very excited about that. But one of the hallmarks of what Explore Mars has been advocating for years is the importance of international collaboration that will enable us to get to the surface of Mars. We don't believe it's going to be possible without events like this. This is very important to be able to educate the world about not only what's going on in space, but how the entire world can participate in this process. It's no longer just about superpowers. It's a total global effort that will be able to get us humans on Mars, hopefully in the 2030s. And so I know we have a shortage of time today, so I want to introduce our panel who will discuss how and why we will send humans and continue to send robots to the surface of Mars and around Mars. So our first panelist will be Joe Cassidy. Joe is Executive Director of Space for Aerojet Rocketdyne. Joe is also a board member, an Executive Vice President of Explore Mars, and a longtime Mars advocate. I believe, Joe, what was in the 90s or even 80s, you started advocating for Mars. So a good long time for Joe. Jim Garvin, who's been a NASA scientist for 37 years. He's currently chief scientist at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. He's the former chief scientist at NASA and has been a passionate advocate for the cause of sending humans to Mars for many years, and is currently advocating various exploration of Venus, I believe, as well. So very exciting times. And Janet Ivey, last but not least, is president of Explore Mars. She's also the CEO and founder of Janet's Planet. She's on the board of governors of the National Space Society, and she's one of the most effective STEM evangelists around the world, winning 12 regional Emmys and 5 Gracie Awards for her efforts. So very impressive. Without further ado, I'd like to bring up Joe Cassidy. Joe's going to give us an overview of some of the thinking behind how we're going to get humans to Mars using international, commercial, industry collaborations that will finally be able to get us to the surface of Mars. Joe?
So the first slide. I wanted to answer the question for you about why Mars, and my answer is because it stretches us just enough. It's not out of reach of our technology today, and this is the first slide, but it does push us to develop things that will push us in a direction that takes us from where we've been for 30 years in low Earth orbit out to the moon and then on beyond the moon to Mars. And so some of these capabilities that we're working on today, for instance, on the left-hand side of the slide, you see the Orion crew vehicle. And Orion is truly international, as Chris mentioned, with the propulsion on the service module coming from ESA. And of course, Lockheed Martin here in the United States developing the actual capsule crew vehicle. And then underneath that, we have the Space Launch System, which is the giant rocket that we've been developing now for a few years. I'm happy to say that it's coming together right now down in Florida. I was there a few weeks ago and got to see it in the VAB at Kennedy Space Center. Everything is now assembled into one piece, as you see it there, except for the Orion, which is going to be brought over and integrated in the next few weeks. There's some final tests going on now in the vehicle. Those two will be put together and rolled out to the pad here within a few weeks. So the exciting thing for us is this hardware is coming together now, and we're on our way. The other elements, if we move over to the middle of the slide, after we get out into deep space, which is going to be a first for us for nearly 50 years now since the Apollo missions. We're celebrating anniversaries every other month now of the different Apollo missions. I think we're coming up on Apollo 16 now, but we haven't been to deep space for all these years. So now we're going to look at two things, really. One is a transit habitat, and that's the thing that the astronauts will live in as they make these journeys of many, many months to get to someplace like Mars. And that's something else we can do at the moon with the Gateway. And I mentioned the Gateway briefly because that's another huge international activity where we're going to work with our partners in Europe, our partners in Japan, Canada, to assemble a miniature space station around the moon. But it's also something where it allows us to develop the techniques of operations in deep space, aggregating vehicles, putting things together that we can then essentially we assemble our spaceship in space to go to Mars. And something like this transit habitat will be a piece of that. And then underneath that is something near and dear to my heart, which is the propulsive element. And for many, many of the pieces that we need to send to Mars, we're looking at things like solar electric propulsion. And the reason for that is it's very efficient. It doesn't need much propellant. And because it costs as much for us to launch propellant into space as it does useful payload and people, we just as soon take things out in a very efficient manner. And so what we're doing right now is we're actually developing the solar electric propulsion that's going to be used to transfer the Gateway elements, the power and propulsion element and the Halo module, which is the first habitat module, to the moon in 2024. And that's underway also today. So part of my theme here is all these things are happening now. We're not talking about something in the far future or something that's just being planned. This is work that's going on immediately right now. And then finally, moving to the right-hand side of this chart, we have technology for getting to the surface of Mars. Right now, we can put down about 1 metric ton with something like a Perseverance rover. That's about as much as we know how to do today with the current entry, descent, and landing technology we have. We've got to scale that up to allow us to put down something on the order of 20 metric tons. And so that's a big challenge, but we're working on that too. We have an experiment plan that's going to be conducted next year. And in terms of larger inflatable devices that can be used as decelerators in the thin Martian atmosphere. And then finally, the last element is the Mars Ascent vehicle itself, because obviously once we have the crew down on the surface of Mars and they've completed their exploration and found this wonderful science that Jim is going to tell you about, we want to get them home. So we have to have a very capable ascent vehicle. And one of the things we're looking at there is the potential to use in-situ resources as part of that vehicle, because if we could just use the oxygen, for instance, that we can get out of the atmosphere of Mars, which we've demonstrated already on Perseverance. This is another exciting thing. We've already shown with MOXIE, an experiment on Perseverance, that we can produce oxygen out of the atmosphere of Mars. And that's not something that we have to be in any particular location to do, because the atmosphere is everywhere. So wherever we land on Mars, we know with the technology we've demonstrated with MOXIE, we can produce oxygen. If we can produce oxygen, we've got an oxidizer for our rocket. So now we don't have to carry all that with us out to Mars. We can actually make our oxidizer on Mars. And that saves us enough mass to make this MAV, Mars Ascent Vehicle, kind of come together. So let's flip to the next slide. And I hope you sense that what I'm saying is Mars is challenging us, but it's not too hard. It's not too hard. It's not too much of a reach for us. We can do this in the 2030s, as Chris said. And so what we're showing here is just some of the architectures that we're looking at, taking those elements that I showed on that previous chart and combining them in ways that allow us to efficiently transport all of the equipment we need out, probably in advance of the crew, and pre-position it, and then to have a very fast, efficient transfer of the crew out to Mars to allow them to get there without too much exposure to radiation and too long of duration of microgravity, so that when they get to Mars, they're fit and ready to explore. And then we're trading off various options for either electric propulsion, nuclear thermal propulsion. These are all still in the works in the trade space. And we're looking at what will minimize the number of launches required, because obviously still the most costly element that we have in any Mars exploration campaign is the amount of material we have to launch off of the surface of Earth. So we try to optimize for minimization of launch, and that brings the cost of the overall campaign down. But we're coming together with ideas that look very promising for doing this. And we have, the wonderful thing is we have some terrific opportunities in the 2030s, starting with 2033, but repeating again on about a 2-year cycle that would enable us to effectively do this mission and achieve the dream that we all have of getting humans to Mars. So finally, on the last slide, I'll switch to the last slide now. There we go. I just thought I'd give you a sense of the scale of these vehicles. And I mentioned earlier that one of the things we're looking at and what we're going to work on, starting with the Gateway, is the idea of aggregating things in space. And you can see why in this picture. I just used 2 of the examples here of a couple of the concepts that we're studying for getting to Mars. One is the nuclear thermal rocket shown in the upper left. And then down on the bottom is the nuclear electric propulsion, which is a hybrid nuclear electric and chemical propulsion concept. But you can see with the space station there for scale, the size of the vehicles that we're actually conceiving of to get to Mars. And that gives you an idea of why we need to assemble these vehicles out in space rather than launch them all together as we did on Apollo. So Mars is challenging. It's not going to be something that we can just go and do right now, but we're working on the technologies and the elements that we need to do it. We're going to be pioneering and pathfinding those out at the moon in the next 10 years. And I think by the early 2030s, all those pieces will be coming together and we'll be ready to make that great leap to go to Mars. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So once we're there, what sort of science are we going to do, Jim? And what do we need to do in advance of getting to Mars as well as robotic missions continue?
Well, thanks, Chris and Joe and Janice. If I could have my slides, please, I would thank you. So I want to talk about the science push that is enabling this frontier that Joe was talking about. And in my first slide, I'll just remind you that we're already on Mars. We're profoundly exploring Mars as a digital exploration frontier. 2 rovers from the United States, 1 from China, soon 1 from Europe, others soon to be there from Japan, and continuing that. So the era of the 20s we're in is a digital exploration of a frontier at Mars. So I can go to the next slide. I guess those, you guys can change for me. In the next slide then, remind you that, if we can go to the next one, I don't think I have control, do I? I can? Oh, okay, here we go. Next slide. Okay, there we go. So remind you of what we have today. Today we explore Mars through this virtual digital presence at the speed of command cycles that are dictated by telecommunications. And so we're there, but the speed of discovery that we people, women and men, are accustomed to as we explore is different. When we are out in a field exploration venue here on Earth, as women or men anywhere, we explore by measuring and characterizing to understand, eventually and ultimately to predict and interpret, so we can learn about our environment, our questions of life or whatever they are, physics, chemistry. That's how we explore. And that is a very immersive kind of activity that we're good at as people. We've been doing it for millennia. And so right now we've learned to extend that capability with the cycles of telecommunications that we're doing today with Perseverance, with Curiosity, to Mars. But the future is going to be that digital exploration ourselves at the speed of discovery that we the people of planet Earth are used to. And whether we bring our dogs with us or not, or other partners, robotic or otherwise, I just picked a nice dog there in the spirit of a canine. I think it was National Dog Day last week. But in any event, we will be exploring there ourselves. And I would submit to all of you, with the science we've discovered and will be discovering as we return samples and bring instruments to look for biosignatures on the Rosalind Franklin rover and other experiments that will result when samples are back on Earth from Phobos, from Mars itself, that we will be able to make that leap to go to Mars ourselves as a cosmic imperative. And so in the next slide, I'll go there, I want to remind you of why that's important. A lot of the Mars we think we know is actually hidden from us. It's hidden beneath the veneer of an atmosphere that we can see through, except during global dust storms. But a lot of the Mars that we're interested in is actually the under Mars, the Mars under the veneer of surface soils, regolith, sediments, really, a sedimentary place that we want to discover. And we're learning about it now through radar experiments on rovers, but that under Mars is going to show us what we believe to be the buried icescapes of a Martian past. And that past climate state, that past environmental state of Mars, is a marvelous frontier for science. That's where we can start searching for the chemistry, potentially, of life, the chemistry of resources. So we can explore that remotely using reconnaissance remote sensing, and missions are being studied now internationally for an international Mars ice mapper approach. But more importantly, eventually we're going to need to go there. And the vertical mobility of going to the under Mars, which will first be demonstrated as will be happening on the Rosalind Franklin rover by ESA in a couple of years, will get us to a couple of meters. Eventually, those big Mars ice capes may require us to get to tens of meters, like we drill into the Antarctic and in the Arctic. And that domain will require the on-site presence of people, machines, reconnaissance, information technology, all coming together. That digital exploration with humanity present will access this under Mars that we all think will be so compelling. It'll give us the history of the old ice, the old climate records, perhaps even a first shot at understanding whether there's extant life on Mars. Science will open that frontier, but it's going to take humanity, I believe, and many people believe, to go there and immersively explore it. So today, we fly drones on Mars. Ingenuity's demonstrated that 13 times. We operate robotic vehicles as Perseverance, Curiosity, Zhurong from China, and others soon. These vehicles are great. We operate them through telecommunication links that often take days to respond to a discovery or an activity or an event. When we get there ourselves, as you can see in this artist view, with a woman standing on the cliff sides of Mars, hopefully not too close, by the way. Valles Marineris is a long way down, so safety first for those women and men that go. But when she gets there, and when we think she must be there, she will be able to operate, and with robotic assistance, that will change the way we see the planet, the way we now explore the deep ocean, the way we explore with drones here on Earth to understand crops, even the spread of disease. That in situ immersive reality of Mars, not the holodecks of Star Trek, but the actual being there is going to be important. That's the kind of exploration frontier that we want to enable in the 30s. And ultimately, when we're there, we might want to ask, what will we discover ourselves? Well, first, we'll discover ourselves as the experiments in living in deep space off planet. And yes, the Gateway in Artemis will give us a fantastic taste for that. But getting to another world, Mars, where we can actually go, as you heard from Joe, where there are science reasons to go, but also compelling reasons as people to get off this planet to see a neck of the solar system that we want to explore is going to be important. And whether we see interesting rocks that remind us of sharks, as you can see in this image from Curiosity, I call it the Shark Tank view, but whatever you think, it also looks a little bit like a small sandworm from the Dune ecosphere, soon to be on movies. But other than that, what will we see when we're there reacting to the Mars up close as it happens will give us those opportunities for discovery that we haven't had yet. That will change everything. And so while people ask, why should we go to Mars ourselves as human beings, as women and men of planet Earth? I would say, why shouldn't we? Because the tools are there, from engineering masterpieces that are already happening. You saw them from Joe. They're happening on Mars today. And so going there ourselves will change the game. With Apollo, we changed the game perhaps 50 years ahead of its time by putting men on the moon to explore. And we see the outcomes. Other than hundreds of pounds of rocks, the great exploration experiences, the discovery, Harrison Schmitt seeing the special soils, the discoveries by the Apollo 15 crew. And these things are just, they're echoes in time. So when we get to Mars, ourselves as women and men of planet Earth, we will make those discoveries. And whether it's a Shark Tank of opportunities, competing for those discoveries, or whether it's just what we are able to do as we explore that Mars, that will change everything. Science is ready. Science will use the 20s to set up for the opportunities. But as we go forward, it's going to be up to all of us to go there together. And so I think Mars, why not? Let's go. And I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Jim. Very fascinating. So now we come to Janet Ivey. Now, Mars exploration, I think, has a powerful role in stimulating STEM education and bringing people together. What thoughts do you have on that, Janet?
Well, it's like I will bring up my first slide and just say Mars is a destination of aspiration, inspiration, and yes, destination. And much like we've heard our fantastic presenters before me in their eloquence talk about this place, what I hope you note that the same energy that Joe Cassidy is full on expressing as he's getting excited about the gateway and propulsion and that sort of thing is the same energy that I see in my students that are elementary, middle school, and high school students when we talk about this possibility and this very close reality of them being the actual generation that will step foot on Mars. And so when I also hear Jim Garvin and his same happiness, it's like he himself calls himself a Martian already. And so I just would ask all of you that are listening to think about not only these very, very interesting high concepts. We hear great words like, this digital frontier and nuclear electric propulsion. So kids are able to conceptualize and take this in. I have got 8-year-olds in some of my classes that are really pondering the great questions. So my big push here is very much like this beautiful Gene Roddenberry quote. Of course, we've just celebrated, I think, Gene's, what would have been the creator of Star Trek's 100th birthday, the 55th year of the Star Trek series. So yes, I'm a Trekkie. But he had a great quote that may be my favorite, and it's, "We are on a journey to keep an appointment with whatever we are." And many people ask me all the time, "Janet, why not the other scientists? Why are you so interested in space exploration? And why are you pushing these students to dream about Mars when we have so many problems here on planet Earth?" And I say, because everything that we innovate to get out there improves life here on Earth. Everything that we learn about out there makes us realize this precious blue ball that we call home, where 7 to 8 billion people live, we can make life better here by what we're innovating for tomorrow on Mars. So I am coming to all of you today that, again, so many people, it's like I'll talk with, well, we really don't be in these courses until kids are in high school or undergraduate. And I say we must turn that on its head. The curiosity of an elementary student or a middle schooler, that is where this love and exploration really is made incredibly clear and manifest. And we must encourage it at the youngest levels so that by the time they get to high school and onto university, they know exactly the path they're going to take. The other thing that I would say, and many of you already do this so beautifully, but I only encourage you to do it more, mentor. If you want the reality and the pipeline of talent for ESA, JAXA, NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, the Australian Space Agency, so many, Luxembourg, all of these places. If you want that pipeline of talent, here's what we have to do. We have to be willing to get industry meeting with these kids. When there is a class or a teacher that calls you and say, "Hey, can you speak to my kids?" Try your best to clear your calendar and say yes, because you never know who you are inspiring, because once they get a picture of you, once they see that you are actually the scientist making these things happen, all of a sudden that is reality, and it has gone from a concept to something they can grasp a hold of and say, wow, I think I might like to be that. In closing, I'll just say this. We must give our students Mars. They will be the people that walk there. And many times when I poll kids about what they think and why we should go to Mars, here's what they say. They say, because we will be better. And I said, we will, as humanity, we will be better. And they said, yes. And I say, why? And the students of today who are dreaming about being those astronauts that set foot on Mars, they say, we'll have a shared experience. We'll all experience the same thing at the very same time. Our very survival will depend on if we get along well together. If we begin to fight and argue and have strife, the mission will fail and we will die. And so these are elementary and middle school children having these very esoteric philosophical discussions that the reason we go to Mars is that so we can show people that the better angels of our nature exist and that we can come together as humans for the good of all, for the benefit of humanity. And that, my friends, is why we must educate on every level, preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, undergraduate, because when we get those young, curious scientists who are digging around in the dirt, who are wanting to put everything in their mouth and they want to taste and learn and grow and understand, let's give them these high concepts. Okay, so they may not understand it the first time, but the second time they stumble on it, they'll go, oh, I think I've heard of that before. So my experience, and especially in the last 18 months of teaching solely online, is that kids are hungry. They are desirous of something more challenging than we have been giving them. And what better challenge to give them than to give them Mars? And that's how we'll honor the giant leap of Apollo and all the great lessons that we learned over 50 years ago as we take this bolder leap to Mars.
Thank you, Janet. Brilliant. Very inspiring. Now, I just want to do a quick round robin. All of you have answered this question to a degree, actually quite well, but I want to pose the question once again. I'll answer it myself first, but then, maybe in different words, why Mars? You've all explained that very well, but each of you, particularly within your frame of your knowledge, what you're working on, but, personally, why you think we should go to Mars. I'll answer that first. And well, of course, I agree with all the answers about discovery, everything that Janet said, everything that Joe said as well. But one of the things that's really inspired me over the last few years, and particularly as we're programming for Explore Mars programs, to be redundant, is the benefits to Earth. I mean, look at everything when you're looking at Mars, looking at problems that we need to solve to go to Mars, like how are we going to eat? How are we going to breathe? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to advance medical science so we can keep our astronauts healthy and safe on Mars? These are tremendous challenges. And when you look at these challenges through the lens of Mars, we could make dramatic innovations that will benefit us here on Earth. As we're looking at food production and, for instance, agriculture on Mars, on this extremely arid, dry environment, how can we actually grow crops? And if we can perfect that on Mars, think of the applications here on Earth to feed people around the world. And in the same thing with, whether it be with cellular grown meat, 3D printed food, or, even things like artificial intelligence in medical practice. Of course, when we're like the astronauts up on ISS, they're still separate from the rest of humanity, but they're still just a phone call away, a quick phone call away. So there's a way to get them back to Earth or have quick medical consultation. On Mars, you're not going to have that. There's such a delay. So it could take upwards of 40 minutes or more. So all of these innovations that we need to advance to go to Mars, I think are going to have a dramatic impact on Earth for the quality of life, but also for the economy here on Earth. So I think when people ask me, why are we going to Mars? To benefit Earth. So Joe, do you want to jump in yourself and give any additional thoughts?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. I think you covered it really well. I always start with inspiration. I think the thing that Janet covered there at the end, I grew up during Apollo. I saw those landings as a 10-year-old boy when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon for the first time. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today. I don't think I had a choice after that. I was so pulled in and inspired by that even though I struggled at points in my academic career, I always came back and I persevered and found my way through engineering school to get a career in this industry. But it was that inspiration that was always there, in the back of my mind. And then the technology, as you said, I get excited about that and all the engineering we're doing now to make this work. But that technology always does translate back to benefit us here on Earth. And I think, the other side of it then is it's going to establish our ability to do other things in the solar system. I mean, we'll go and we'll explore Mars and hopefully we'll find that there once was at least life on Mars. So we're not alone, or we weren't alone. We're not the only place that has life in the universe. But the other aspect, and that's going to be just totally mind blowing, I think, for humanity, if that's the case. But the technology that we develop to go there will enable us to go, to Venus and do things on Venus as we evolve ourselves into a species that can move about in the solar system. We can go to asteroids. We can go get resources from these other places. The power technology we're going to need to support this kind of outpost on Mars will enable us to make things from resources on the moon, And I said once in my talk, the biggest challenge we have right now is everything we take into space has to come off the surface of Earth. If we get to the point where we can start to make stuff in space from resources that are out in space, that's just going to really open up the whole frontier to, and it's, you know, very similar to our history on Earth, right? It's our ability to go someplace and then take the resources that we find there and make those resources something that we can build upon. That's really what I see as you know, what's going to happen when we go to Mars, and that'll open up the whole solar system to humanity.
Thank you, Joe. Jim, we have 3 minutes and 27 seconds.
So this is a big question because there's two parts. The first is, well, aren't we on Mars now? We are. And so we've answered that question. We have invested in Mars. The human condition on Mars is now embodied in those robots that are exploring and bringing those wonderments, those inspirations that Janet and Joe talked about. So the real question is, why do we need to go to Mars? We, the human beings of planet Earth. And that's a bigger question. And that's what I think the cosmic imperative comes in. Because the one place we can go, building on what we've done on the space station and Artemis and a gateway, is Mars. And the science allure of that is tremendous. Mars is the one place close by where we can reasonably ask, are we alone? Through the record books of the story and the rocks and the chemistry in the ice. And we know that from what we've been doing. So I say, why not Mars? Why should not we go? And whether we can apply everything back to Earth, very valid question. Mars is a natural laboratory for climate change run one way, and perhaps Venus is the other. But if we get to know these places, the feedback loops to how we understand ourselves and our condition on this wonderful spaceship Earth, in this Earth system science domain, is going to be tremendous. And the final point I'll make is, we don't know what we don't know. And when we went to the moon 50 years ahead of our time with Apollo, look at what we discovered. The collisional universe, the nature of the records of the planets being so different than our Earth. Imagine being on a Mars ourselves with that discovery potential there, not waiting for multi-year cycles of returning samples or data, but being there in the immediacy of that. The digital frontier will become alive when we're there ourselves. And that's why we have to go. I think the people of Earth are ready. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Jim. Janet, 1 minute and 32 seconds.
I think I'll just be quick, and you guys have heard it. We go, and in the words of astronaut Nicole Stott, she's told this to my students, we can't ever be good crewmates out there if we're not good crewmates here. And so my why Mars is, I think it's a grand experiment, not only for science, but it's also a grand experiment for humans. We can be better. We can be kinder. We can be gentler, compassionate, collaborative. All of those, and I don't really like to call them soft skills. I think they are necessary human skills. And I think as we work together with partners across the globe to attain these amazing human feats of putting boots on Mars, we're going to find the better angels of our nature.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Joe, and thank you, Jim. Spectacular presentation. Thank you for the European Rover Challenge. We enjoyed this very much. As I said before, we hope we'll be able to come in person in future years. But I just want to finish off by saying, you know, if you have not registered for the Humans to Mars Summit, which is taking place next Monday through Wednesday, September 13th through 15th. Please visit us at exploremars.org and register, and it'll be streamed out through multiple platforms. So we look forward to seeing you there. So I hope you have a great rest of your conference.